Here we go. Listen, if you're a guest with us, I need to start today by just being really honest, okay? I need to make a couple confessions to you. I have been living in the state of Colorado for almost a decade, and I feel very insecure as a Colorado man. You're like, where's this going? Let me tell you where it's going. Let me just give you a few reasons why I feel a little insecure. First one is, I can't grow a full beard. And it turns out to live in Colorado as a man, just look around the room, like all the beautiful, beautiful pieces of hair on the face. I can't do it. No matter how hard I try, it doesn't matter. People are like, just give it time. My friends who have really great beards are like, just give it time. I'm like, I'm 40, not 45. What do you mean time? And it gets really bad because my kids start to make fun of me when I try. It's pretty emasculating. So insecurity number one. Insecurity number two is, listen, I have a very narrow skill set. I'm not very good at many things. I'm good at like 3 things in life. The rest, I'm average or really poor. And one of the skills that I just don't have is I don't have the fix-it gene. It skipped right over me. I mean, I see guys in Denver driving big trucks with tools in the back. I drive a minivan with grocery bags in the back. Like, the only tools in my house belong to my wife. And so, like, we have this long history in 20 years of marriage where I will try to fix something or I will try to put, like, some furniture together. God bless IKEA. And I've got things backwards, and it always ends the exact same. I end up throwing the tool across the room, few choice words, walking out, and I come back a few hours later, and my wife has fixed it or put it together. That's how it goes in our household. And just this last week, she reminded me of the very first time in our marriage where she realized that the fix-it gene had skipped my generation. My dad had it, my grandfather had it. It went right over me to my sister, who has common sense. We had just gotten married. We were in this little apartment. And of course, she wanted to spruce up one of the kitchen walls, as you would do, right, ladies? You can have a blank kitchen wall. And so she had these pretty framed photos of flowers and fields. She had 2 shelves. And she said, do you think you could get the 2 shelves and then the framed photos up on that wall to make it look really nice when we have dinner together? And I said, well, I can definitely try. And so I thought, the framed photos, that I know how to do, but the shelves, they have holes in the back. And you have to line those holes up. And so I was like, well, let me just try that first. Let's get the hard part done first. And I proceeded to try to get the shelves up, and 10 holes later, all across her kitchen wall, and I still couldn't line the shelves up. And she comes walking in, and she just pauses, and she looks at it. And of course, being my wife, Puerto Rican, everything, everything's a 10 out of 10. She acts as if it's a murder scene. As she comes in, and no lie, there's like, not only is there holes in the wall, but there's little chunks of drywall on the floor. And there's like drywall kind of dust. It's like if you were eating Cheetos and had Cheeto dust on your shirt. There's like drywall dust on my shirt. And I just kind of turn and look at her, and she's like, what have you done? And she walks out of the room. And I think, oh no, this is not a good way to start marriage. So I do the only thing I know how to do, which is I decide to put those pretty framed photos over all the holes. And when she came back, I said, so the photos are up. I'm just gonna need your help with the shelves. And she proceeded to put the shelves up in different places. And whenever she wants to have fun with me, she reminds me of that story, the first time she knew that I didn't have the fix-it gene. Now, you might be asking yourself, hey, Corey, nice story, but why tell that story at Easter? I mean, at Easter, we're here to celebrate an empty tomb and a risen Savior. But, I've often thought back to that kitchen wall and to those holes and the pretty framed photos that went over that, and I've thought, that's a pretty decent metaphor for life. Because on the surface, things look fairly good. You don't have to look further than our social media pages. Pretty framed photos of flowers and fields. But behind those photos, often there's holes in the wall. There's places in our life that don't make sense. There's places that things have been broken. There's places where the drywall of life has gotten on our shirt and we don't know what to do with it. There's a mess all over the floor. And the question for us as we arrive on Easter Sunday is, what do we do with those holes? What do we do with the drywall dust? What do we do when we can't make things pretty? What do we do when we can't fake it? What do we do when life actually just doesn't work and the pretty frames don't cover it up? How do we cope with that? And that's what I want us to explore today as we come to Easter together. If you've not been with us, we've been in a series for the last 7 weeks called Beauty from Ashes. And interestingly enough, it's out of an Old Testament book. It's from the book of Isaiah. And the reason we chose to do this is because Isaiah has a surprising amount of things to say about the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. So much so that scholars have actually called him the 5th gospel writer. So in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John tell us all about the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. But it turns out, so does Isaiah. But here's the kicker. Isaiah was writing 700 years in advance of the time of Jesus. And he's predicting what Jesus' life and his death and his resurrection would look like. And I think that alone should catch our attention. And so we thought for today, it might be interesting to look at Isaiah's commentary on what would happen 700 years later and how that would impact our lives. And so we've been working through the book of Isaiah, and today we arrive at the apex of the book. Most scholars say that Isaiah chapter 61 is the height of all of his writings, that all of his writings are pointing to this chapter. In Isaiah 61, here is what we read. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Now, it's worth pausing just to appreciate the beauty of this literature. This is really a beautiful piece of literature. And what's so interesting about this is that if you fast forward into the New Testament, Luke, the doctor who's writing about the life of Jesus, the way that he explains Jesus' life and what is to come is in Luke chapter 4. We'll put it up here. This should look very, very similar to you. Jesus stands up at the beginning of his public ministry. He's about to launch 3 years of all the things that we've heard that he's done, and he quotes Isaiah chapter 61 as if to say, Isaiah had it right. I am that guy, and I have come to do the things that Isaiah talked about. And this will be good news for a weary world and for a cynical world and for a broken world. Now, what's interesting about Isaiah is you have to keep in mind, when a prophet is writing, a prophet is speaking to 3 different time frames. So Isaiah is speaking to the time of Jesus. Isaiah is also speaking to our time, to a future time, when God will be coming to make all things right. But Isaiah is also speaking to his present generation. He's doing 3 things at once. And to make these words more powerful, we need to understand the context to who Isaiah is writing to. He's writing to people who have been exiled. His country has been laid waste. Babylon has come and taken everyone captive. They've come and taken the people away. And so people have lost loved ones, and they're now living in Babylon. They're not in Jerusalem. They're not in Israel, the promised land. And their cultural identity is being stripped away, and they're in despair, and they're in mourning. Virtually everything that was important to them had literally been burned to the ground. Jerusalem was burned, literally to ashes. You might say drywall dust is what was left. In the scene then that Isaiah describes, the prophet Jeremiah comes along and describes a similar scene and just talks about cities that are ruined and that are devastated, that literally are in rubble. Now, I know many of you are probably aware that 2 months ago, there was a massive earthquake on the border of Syria and Turkey. And it was just absolutely devastating. A few weeks ago, the New York Times did a visual guide on what some of the historic cities and streets look like. And as you can see, it's just absolute rubble. And of course, it's not just across the world. Just a couple weeks ago, there were massive tornadoes in Mississippi, and I could show you photos of rubble from people in neighboring towns went to sleep and woke up the next morning, and the town that was 5 miles down was literally gone. It was devastated. And it gives you a sense of what Isaiah is writing about. It's the sense of devastation that his people are experiencing. And you can only imagine how painful that is and disorienting and confusing. Like, this isn't just there's holes in the walls. This is there's no walls at all. There's not enough pretty pictures to cover any of this mess up. Catherine May, who's a best-selling author, published a book earlier this year that actually is still on the New York Times bestseller list. And the book is called Enchantment, Awakening Wonder in an Anxious Age. And she describes this restlessness, this longing for there to be restoration around all the things that have crumbled in our culture over these last few years. She says this: the last decade has filled so many of us with a growing sense of unreality. We seem trapped in a grind of constant change without ever getting the chance to integrate it. Those rolling news cycles, the chatter on social media, the way that our families have split along partisan lines, it feels as though we've undergone a halving, then a quartering, and now we're some kind of social rubble. I love that phrase, social rubble. If there were a spirit of this age, it would look a lot like fear. For years now, we've been running like rabbits. Every year, it seems we must run harder. There's no other solution. We can only run and panic and chatter out our fears to each other, who will mirror them back to us. And I think probably most of us sitting in the room know exactly what she's saying and what she's describing when she uses this phrase. We've experienced social rubble. And we've become disenchanted and disillusioned. Our trust in institutions at an all-time low. And this is why I think that her book is a bestseller, because people feel this way. And so I want to suggest to us that arriving here today and being able to truly, truly celebrate Easter, our first step is we need to be honest about the current state of affairs. That's actually how we get to worship in just a moment, is we're honest about what's happening in us and what's happening around us. Maybe a way to say this in the words of Catherine May or the prophet Isaiah is that we need to recognize the rubble and the ruins. See, if we're being really honest, some of us has shown up at this Easter service, and we would just have to say, there are parts of my life that feel like they're in ruins, or they feel like there's rubble, or if it's not that far, you go, there is a little bit of drywall dust on my shirt. Like things haven't all been up and to the right. Maybe you would say, my career isn't working. It's not what I thought it would be. My marriage is not where I thought it would be. It feels like it's on thin ice. We have a child who just is struggling with this thing or that thing. We have an aging parent, and we've never had to deal with an aging parent. Or maybe you've lost a parent, or you've lost a loved one in these last couple years. Some of you have shown up and you feel trapped in an addiction, and you're not sure how to talk about it, and you're not sure how to even get help for that. How do you take a step? I think many of us would say, man, my mental health is not what it once was. Some of us show up and go, honestly, I just feel kind of lonely. I feel isolated. Some of you have come in the room today and you've given up on a dream recently. And listen, if that's not describing you, I think some of us would just say, it's not the specifics like that. I just have this gnawing sense of restlessness. Like when I'm quiet and I just sit, it just seems like something's not quite right. Now listen, I don't want to depress us on Easter, okay? So I promise good news is coming. But again, I think it's important that this is how we actually step into the Easter celebration, is we have to get honest about our current condition. And for some of you, you might say, hey, Corey, actually, I don't experience any of those things. Like my life is working, my family is good, or my friendships are good, or my career is good, or my finances are good. Like I'm in a really sweet season. I would say praise God for that. Enjoy that season. But even you then, with the rest of us, you then in our culture, you bump into the Nashville school shooting and kids being killed. And you bump into endless political debates that don't feel like they're really serving anyone. And you bump into some of our friends on the streets who are homeless, who have nowhere to go tonight. And I think all of us in these moments, we face the reality of a world that is broken, that there are holes in the wall, that there's a mess on the floor. And I think that Catherine May has diagnosed the problem really well. And I like then, because she diagnoses it that way with disenchantment, this idea of enchantment and the need for awakening to believe again and to hope. Because I think as a culture, we've become a bit cynical about real hope and about real possibility. I honestly think that we've come to believe that good stories, like the story we just read, Mark 16 and Isaiah 61, these are good stories. We've come to believe that good stories are enchanted, that they're only possible in fairy tales. And of course, we're all adults. We know that fairy tales aren't real. So when we read something like a Mark 16 and like in Isaiah 61, we want it to be true. I think in our culture, we want it to be true. We want to believe that that's true, that that's possible, but we're just not sure if it is possible. I have a friend who went to plant a church in Europe, and he, met all kinds of people and developed deep friendships. And there was a guy that he was really good friends with, and they would just share their life with each other. And he was saying that one year around the time of Easter, his friend was really curious about his Christianity because he had grown up in Europe, no religion. And so he was talking to him about Easter, and here's what Good Friday means, and here's what Easter's about for me, and it gives me hope. And actually, I think it gives the world hope. And he's telling this story, and after a moment, his friend just kind of pauses. And he said to him this, he said, if that story isn't true, I hope and wish there's a story like it that is true. You see, we all want there to be a better story, don't we? Because how else do we deal with the reality of the ruins in our lives and in our world today? See, this is a universal experience. Every human being has this sense that not all is right in the world, and how will it be made right? And that then brings us back to the story that we started with today, the Easter story out of Mark 16. And the question that every one of us should ask is, does it have something to say about the rubble that we experience in life these days? Like, is this good news and relatable to Easter of 2023? Not just 33 AD. And here's what it said as a reminder. Mark 16, beginning in verse 4. But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. And as they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb, and they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. Now, I want you to picture this scene in your mind right now. They've shown up. The sun has just come up. They're now permitted to go to the tomb. They spent Saturday weeping and mourning for Jesus, and they show up at the tomb, and you have to imagine they didn't expect to find the stone rolled away. There was nothing in the story that would lend that to their belief, and so they're coming to mourn a dead man. And so they're bringing their despair and they're bringing their disenchantment. You might say that they're bringing their ruins to this tomb. They're bringing the social rubble. And as they get there, they get totally surprised with an offer to trade their ruins for Jesus' resurrection. And this then, friends, this experience sets the stage and the tone for every single human from those women on to be brought to a place of a choice and an experience. And that's this simple question: will you receive the great exchange? Will you receive it? Isaiah talked about it 700 years in advance of Jesus. He said, when the Messiah comes, when the suffering servant comes, what he's going to do, the way you're going to know that it's him, that he's the Savior of the world, is that he's going to offer you a great exchange, that you're going to have beauty from ashes, and you're going to have joy in the place of mourning, and you're going to have salvation instead of sadness, and you're going to get resurrection in the place of rubble. But here's the key, friends. On this Easter morning, you have to decide whether or not you'll receive that. Will you receive the great exchange? Because here's the scripture that never gets read on Easter. It's the next few verses in 9 through 13. Check this out. When Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary, of whom he had driven the 7 demons out. She went and told those who had been with them, who were mourning and weeping. When they heard that Jesus was alive and that she had seen him, they did not believe it. Afterward, Jesus appeared in a different form to 2 of them while they were walking in the country. These returned and reported it to the rest, but they did not believe them either. Now, again, I want you to picture this. There's literally an empty tomb. There's an angel glowing, which probably means there's a resurrected Jesus. And yet his closest friends were cynical and unconvinced and did not believe. They were unwilling to receive the great exchange that Isaiah promised that would come in the Messiah. And you might say, oh, hey, that's crazy. That would never be me. I mean, if I was there, it would be obvious. But y'all, we do this all the time. Let me give you an illustration. Not quite as intense, but I think it works. How many of you love gift cards? It's like, who doesn't love to get a good gift card, right? Free money. Listen, if you're a guest and you don't know me, I'm cheap. I love free money. Okay? I think Pastor Month is like in January or February, so just remember that, all right? Okay, but here's the deal. I love free money, but here's the kicker. I almost never use gift cards. It is a major personal flaw. I get so excited about gift cards because it's free that in my mind, I create this like, oh man, we're gonna save this for our anniversary. And it's gonna be this amazing moment, and that big bill is gonna come out, and I'm gonna drop that gift card down. I'm gonna pay a $9 tip, and it's gonna be the best experience ever. And so I hold the gift card, and I never use it. Just a few weeks ago, Cindy and I were pumped. We're like, we're gonna go to the Alamo, we're gonna watch Creed 3. And she had found a Fandango gift card. And she's like, ooh, baby, it's free. And I'm like, my favorite kind. So we go, and I drop her off in front of the Alamo, and I'm like, I'm gonna go get seats, you go in and pay, blah, blah, blah. I come walking through the door, and I see this 19-year-old at the register just swiping the card repeatedly. I'm like, uh-oh. And my wife, literally, I can just watch her. She just takes a deep breath, hands on her hips, and she looks at me and she said, you waited too long. Now it's not worth anything. It's useless. And we had to pay the $20 to see Creed 3. Friends, you have to use it. You have to receive it. And the question for you this Easter is, will you? Will you receive the great exchange? For some of you who've come to this place and you never know that was a choice. For me, when I was 20, I didn't know that was a choice. I was playing religious games. Nobody told me that it was about relationship with Jesus. Nobody told me about an exchange. I was just checking boxes, and someone came along and said, no, Jesus wants to make an exchange with you. He wants your shame, and he wants your sorrows, and he wants your sin, and he wants your embarrassments, and he wants the holes in the wall, and he wants to give you restoration, and he wants to give you freedom, and he wants to give you forgiveness, but you've got to take the great exchange. And the question for every single one of us today is, will we do that? Will we do it? For some of you, you've never been presented with that. For some of you, you have, but you go, it's been a really, really long time. A really long time. And today is your day to just say, yes, I want that exchange, King Jesus. I want it. Well, let me finish here. Last thought. Because what's amazing about what we're reading here is the story doesn't end with just that. I mean, that is great news, but it doesn't end. Check out Isaiah 61, verse 4, just as a reminder. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Friends, it turns out that the message of the good news of Jesus Christ and his cross, his death and his resurrection is not just for our personal lives, but it's for the entire world. And actually, the message of Easter in its fullness is an invitation to join Jesus in the rebuilding and the renewal of all things. This is incredible. It's not just individual salvation. It's so much larger. That's the Easter message. God's in the business of rebuilding everything that's in ruins. Mr. Rogers has this famous quote. He says, when I was a boy, I would see scary things on the news, And my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You'll always find the people who are helping in the scary things. And I would just like to make a small edit to Mr. Rogers' mother to say, when you say yes to Jesus, when you receive the great exchange, you don't just look for the helpers, you become the helpers. Y'all, that's why we stand here most Sundays and we talk about some kind of partnership in our city. Because when we receive the great exchange, the natural thing that happens is Jesus says, come with me, y'all. I'm in the renewal and the rebuilding of all things. And I want you to come and I want you to do it with me. That's why this very month, we're in conversation to how do we assist and serve pregnant teenage girls. And we're talking about how do we build teams that come around foster parents who are taking care of the least of these in our city. Because it's one thing to talk about the words of Jesus, that's beautiful, but it's an entirely another thing to join in the works of Jesus. And that also is the Easter message. See, we're in our community for our community. We're not just sitting back waiting for heaven someday. That's not the message of Easter. The message of Easter is that we get to be a part of rebuilding something beautiful. So here it is. Here's the message. You start with recognizing the ruins and the rubble of your life and of the world around you. Don't sugarcoat it. Be honest about it. Because then that sets you up to receive the great exchange that's offered to you in Jesus Christ and his death and his resurrection, the forgiveness that is yours in him. And then when that begins to happen, he invites you into the renewal and the rebuilding of all things. Friends, this is the real story of Easter. It is better than any fairy tale you have ever heard.